And this was one of the most responded. I had literally within 2 hours, 40 people responding. And what was pervasive throughout was I had, I don't want to lean into what you're going to ask for, but we were each given a company to talk about what they did really well and one that maybe what they're not doing so well or where they're at risk. So I put my 2 companies out there, and there wasn't a person who didn't write passionately about how they thought Amazon was by far the most customer-focused of the companies on your list, that they had a dedication and an eye towards what is important to the customer, not them, so customer first. They talked about how they're very open, impartial, so they don't just show the good, or try to filter down. They show all the reviews, good or bad. That open piece I mentioned, AWS, so the Amazon services, gets a ton of props, which leads into how they're not only successful with customers. Ian was regaling us with stories about how he lives in Texas and he basically gets an Amazon shipment every day, including a record player for his son most recently this morning, and food, because in Texas apparently they're limited selection. But Amazon is
about that, or Twitter
Amazon's great with B2C, but the B2B on the AWS is hosting the vast majority of startups. So, I mean, really, you going down the list, it was stuff coming from everywhere, but in general, it was hard to find where Amazon wasn't just crushing it.
Yeah. All right, Ian, give us your thoughts on one of these power brokers. That would be Google.
Yeah, before I go to those power brokers, I just want to take a second and talk about a couple of other power brokers, and relevant in the news right now. I'm sitting next to one of them, and I heard he's been supporting New York's recovery, and Sandy, for people that shaved their heads like the Donald. So I just wanted to thank Mark Cuban for his support of this city and the recovery of Sandy. And for beating up on Donald Trump, because he's ridiculous, if you read the tweets. The one about playing as kids in Kenya together was awesome, man. That was hilarious. All right, so back to seriousness here. Yeah, Google. So what's Google done right to become a power broker? And I think, they've done a lot of things right. All these companies have done a lot of things right, a lot of, mistakes and hurdles. But I think the most prescient thing about Google was many, many years ago, they understood that the puck was headed towards big data. Many of you may have seen this New York Times article a couple of weeks ago that said, that predicted that by 2015, CMO technology spending will outpace CIO technology spending. An appropriate point to be made at ADTech here. And Google has just recently consolidated 60 plus of their privacy policies to make it very convenient for you guys to give them all of your data so that they know everything about you every second of the day. So, they own the majority of data out there, and I think that's what they've done incredibly well, is they've understood that eventually they could combine all of those sources, maps, and 60 plus other channels, and essentially become Skynet.
Yeah,
which they just did last month when they combined those privacy
They actually
policies.
did. If you guys haven't read that Inside the Plex book, you really should, because that's how you know, in the Plex, you'll know they're becoming Skynet for sure. Mark, you get Facebook.
Facebook. It's interesting. I think Facebook was on a path comparable to the Google that Tim Armstrong was talking about. Customer, get out there and create a unique experience. Then all of a sudden, they went public. And when they went public, it was as if they made a 180-degree shift, so that rather than a focus on the experience and the end user, or even their advertisers, or the brands, or whoever was on, it was about, we better not disappoint Wall Street. So all of a sudden, you start getting promoted posts. So we, multiple of my companies, we invested a lot of time and effort and money into, in essence, making Facebook our destination, even more so than our website. And all of a sudden, in order to reach all those people that we thought were our friends, that liked us, we had to pay for our friends. Now, I'm used to paying for friends. But, you know, don't make me do it. Give me the choice. And so I think they've made a strategic mistake, and they really should look at Amazon as a template for what they should be doing. If you go back in the day to the early days of Amazon, right after they went public, they were just crushed. Quarter after quarter, where Jeff Bezos just did not care what Wall Street said or did. He invested in the future. He invested in anticipation of where his business was going to be, as opposed to where it was. And robotics, warehouses, distribution, products, a lot of the same things that you're seeing with the Kindle now were reflected in different types of investments back then. You're not seeing those types of things with Facebook. Rather than futuristic, wow, I think they might get there. That's going to be really amazing when they get there. It's, all right, we're going to tinker with this because we need mobile. We just realized we need mobile, so let's react. Oh, you don't like the way our ads look? Let's react. You don't like the way our posts are presented once you like somebody or subscribe to somebody? Let's react. So they're going to need very quickly to go back to focusing on how to stay ahead of the game. And, I'm a big believer that you don't ask your customers what they want, right? The job of a customer or a consumer is not to figure out where your product should go. We all have enough things on our mind. The job of a visionary in a company is to anticipate and send your product, your service, whatever it is you have, in the direction of where you think you need to be. Like Wayne Gretzky said, you don't go where the puck is, you go where the puck is going to be. And I think Facebook has lost that. And it's the network effect that they have is amazing, but it's almost becoming a placeholder as opposed to a destination. And that's a big change that they're going to have to overcome.
So you think what they did right before was, in some cases, force our new privacy needs on us, anticipate what the consumer would want instead of asking. That's how they got to where they are.
Well, how they got to where they are was that the male population never realized there were so many hot women across the country. And so we all had to go check out the pictures, but then they went with it, right? Yeah, call it like it is. But then they went with it, right? They let the network take them where they needed to go. And they tried to keep up with the network. Now they're trying to keep up with the metrics that Wall Street and their advisors are telling them they need to reach. And that's not how they're going to be successful long term.
So Stephanie, you actually, to flip this question now, to look at what these companies are in danger of doing wrong, Mark's done a lot of your groundwork for you, which I know you were hoping would happen.
That's really answered my question.
But what else do you think? What is Facebook in danger of? What could kick them off this list the next time we do this panel?
Well, so I work for an agency that that's owned by WPP, and WPP is the biggest advertiser for Google, and I think it may be the biggest for Facebook. I think it was $400 million this year, and that's great. But the challenge that Facebook has is I believe, and I think my company's said this as well, that Facebook is a tremendous branding platform. Because what Facebook is good for is it's like letter writing used to be. Facebook is where you go to connect with people you actually like and care about, and your family, and whether you should or not, people have a very calm, personal sense that they're engaging one-on-one with whoever that person is. That is an interaction that you really don't want to interrupt. So branding works because a person might choose a page, or there's something on that page recommended by a friend. But when you drop an intrusive advertisement into that experience, you are interrupting something very natural and precious. And I think that I think their biggest problem is I think there's a risk that they'll over-monetize, which ties back to Mark. So now there's even more pressure to over-monetize because they went public. The second thing is and Mark referred to this a little bit too, is they don't seem to, I'm with you that customers don't know what they want, but I think that there's a difference between that and changing your experience overnight and not telling anybody. So I think there's something, right? There's something in between that they continue to miss over and over and over again. And there's just, there's nothing in the market in this country that really replaces it, so people get irritated and then they just go back to it. But the over-monetization thing is serious for them, and they're going to need to figure out how to scale revenues without interrupting the reason you're on Facebook in the first place.